Hey everybody, James Introcaso here, and before we start this episode of Tabletop Babble, I just wanted to let you know about one of the sponsors for this podcast. I am talking about Lone Wolf Development, the makers of Hero Lab, an amazing character and encounter builder that you can get not just for 5th edition, but for so many other systems like Pathfinder, Mutants and Masterminds, Call of Cthulhu, and the new smash hit sci-fi RPG, Starfinder. Now, Hero Lab has taken your game even further with Hero Lab Online, which allows for party loot management, a tactical console, direct GM to player and player to player interaction, and there's even a streamlined starship management tool for those of you playing Starfinder. Hero Lab Online makes managing RPGs a snap so you can focus on playing the game. You can print your heroes using one of many output options. I'm talking about emailing your character to another Hero Lab user, saving as PDF, or old school printing it out on paper. There's a validation engine that verifies your character is totally legal and satisfies every single rule, or you can create your own content, go in there, break the game. You can even create your own game systems with the authoring kit. You have options to work directly with D20 Pro and Fantasy Grounds, so you should find out more at GetHeroLab.com. That's GetHeroLab.com. Tell them DSPN sent you. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I'm talking with Johnn Four and Ruty Rutenberg about some amazing DM advice questions John has gathered from his listeners. This is something a little different that John and I are going to do every month with a guest GM friend where we take questions from various listeners. So if you have a thought, you can send them to John, or you can head on over to Twitter and tweet questions at me over at James Introcaso, or you can head on over to don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com and use the contact us form, and you can send questions to the show that way as well. Make sure you put in your subject line, Tabletop Babble question. All right, let's get to our first batch of amazing listener questions. Okay, everybody, now I am here with two amazing game designers, two of my favorite people in the world, Ruty Rutenberg and Johnn Four. Welcome to Tabletop Babble. It is awesome to have you here. Ruty, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
I am the obligatory Woot. I am Ruty Rutenberg, and I am a professional live streamer for Dungeons and Dragons and other RPGs on the Maze Arcana channel, so twitch.tv/Maze Arcana, and on twitch.tv/D&D. And I do a lot of conventions that I get sent around to do panels about dungeon mastering. And then I guess I am an author as well. I guess I'm an author. I do a lot of writing.
Definitely. 100% an author. I'm one of the DMs Guild adepts, or adepts, depending on who you are, where you're from. It is amazing work that you do, and someday we should have you on to talk about just how much work streaming is, because I think people think you just play D&D, and God, is that not true?
Yeah, we don't get the same situation that like Critical Role has, where they have a studio and people that do a lot of the production for them, and they do show up and get to put a lot more time into their characters and that kind of thought and into planning campaign stuff, because they have somebody running the cameras and whatnot. But we've done it all the way down from using a bunch of Logitechs when we started and burning Satine's computer down, to all of our black magic stuff now that we use to get that nice crystal clear thing. And we've even traveled with it, which is a horror unto itself.
Yes. Oh, man. Yeah. I could talk cameras getting lost in airports with you another time for sure. But yes, it is an amazing stream. People should definitely check out Maze Arcana. And also with us is the one and only Johnn Four. John, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Thanks, James. I help game masters have more fun at every game through my Game Master Tips newsletter at roleplayingtips.com. And I write books and ramble on in online courses and have produced an app to help game masters organize their campaigns better. And so I live and breathe RPGs and game mastering.
Excellent, excellent. And John, you actually came to me with the idea for this podcast, which I think is brilliant. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about what the sort of discussion we're going to have is today, and how we got these questions from your readers?
Yeah, so I get a lot of email from people from game masters who have different questions about how to be a better game master or how to deal with things at their game table or how to think the game. And so I've selected a few questions that I think would be good for a panel to answer, a panel of experts, and I'll chime in as well. And the questions are, I think, along the lines of how do I generate a better experience for my players? That's just sort of a roughshod theme through each of these questions. And so the idea was that you and I would be co-hosting these questions with some kind of awesome celebrity within the industry. And so you drummed up Ruty, which is amazing. You guys are both adepts at the GM skill. Like when you get Lich status, I just see your names everywhere on all the work that's in the bestsellers lists and in the most popular lists. It's fantastic.
Man, thanks. I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it, James. Like not that they work this hard, but like we have a bar that we hold ourselves to. Mm-hmm. And
can you drink at that bar?
I think there was copious amounts of drinking. It's hard to get past Chris Lindsay without getting a bourbon, like offered up in those situations. But we like to hold ourselves to a pretty high bar, and so it's almost one of those things where, James could look at me and be like, "Hey, man, what's going on with this one? Like, I feel like, are you tired? Like, what's going on?" And I won't take that as in like I'm a jerk. Like I'm phoning it in. I'll be like, "Oh man, what did I do? Okay, where am I? Oh man, that's cliche. I need to change that." Like we're pretty good about, I think, working openly and not letting our egos get in the way. We don't have necessarily that auteurism that so many people have when they create content, as if they were the first person to think of that idea.
Yeah,
we're pretty lucky in that way.
Definitely.
So your quality speaks for itself. Then that's awesome.
Yeah. It's definitely a group of people who, on their own, each create amazing things, but together create something. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole, or however that saying goes. That we are creating things together that we could never create on our own is an incredible experience, and I think the fact that everyone is so brilliant and has so many ideas and is bringing fresh perspectives really helps keep people invigorated and alive. And also the fact that we can really be honest with each other is really, really great.
Yeah. There's no way that you can have an undertaking like XLN under one person and turn it out in a month. Like that's just not possible. And we get a little bit of a heads up from Wizards, from our NDAs, but it's, especially for something like Xanathars, it's no more than what UA was. So anybody that had been tracking the UA knows exactly what's coming out in that book if they're paying attention. So like you had a plethora of things in about 3 years worth of backstory that you could be like, oh, okay, so I know what I need to start making. We got handed the thing and we hit the ground running. And if I hadn't had both James, and if I had had Rich running very specific jobs, because we divided that thing up like it was a real product. And if I didn't have them, then there's no way I could have done that thing on my own. I don't think any of us could have gotten close to what we accomplished.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's an amazing program and it's really fun, and it is a lot of work. So yes, there is a lot of drinking at that bar for sure. But Johnn Four, you raised the bar too. You're an amazing human being, amazing game master, amazing advice giver. And that is why people are coming to you to sip from your font of knowledge. And so we've got some great questions here. The first one is from Mark Arisen or Arisen. I apologize, Mark, if I mispronounced your last name, but this question is, how do you keep things fresh for your players year in and year out when they have seen it all and done it all? So yeah, John, let's start with you. How do you keep it fresh?
Well, something that recent experience I've had is I went to a game convention, and I don't do that regularly, but so it's been a while. But then I was a player, and I got to play three new game systems, or three game systems I had never encountered before. So that did a whole bunch of things. One was getting on the other side of the screen and seeing things from that perspective. And so by sharing experience, rubbing elbows with your fellow players, you kind of remember, or it comes back into your awareness about what players find exciting and what they enjoy a lot on that side. And then trying out the new games. That was fantastic. So I'm hardcore D&D player. It's the primary game I've played throughout the years. Other game systems that I've tried have been D&D-esque, like Pathfinder. Even Rolemaster and GURPS and Hero Systems are, that kind of crunch-heavy style. And so these were story games like Fate and Savage Worlds. So those gave me lots of ideas on how I could approach things differently as a GM, which means that my players will probably experience new and different things as well. Two more ideas. One is to leave your GM comfort zone. So if you are scared of improv, try 100% improv session. If you're scared of preparing, then challenge yourself to design a really cool encounter. Wherever you feel that you're getting into uncomfortable ground, see if you can explore that a little bit more. Because if it's new to you, it's going to be new to your players downstream. And then I think it's important that over time with the same group of players that you explore deeper characters. So the greater the character development and the more relationships and details that you add as a result of good characters, good characterization, then you're going to have new experiences, because I think all stories devolve into some 36 plots or something like that. So as professional consumers of movies and books and theater and things, we've already heard all of the stories and just about all the permutations of what the situations can happen in multiple genres. So the key, I think, is to go deep into characters, because then you get that meaning and that story flavor that your players might not be used to. It's more than just kick down the door again. It's more about, why am I kicking down the door this time? So those are some thoughts off the top of my head. How about you, Rudy?
I mean, you just hit so much good stuff there. First off, let me say that in streaming, when you are running a game, you don't have the option to kind of stop and realign things. So depending on the amount of prep you get to do, you may end up running a lot of things very much improv. I know I've run entire 2 or 3 entire sessions where the only thing I knew was that they had broke the last session, and I had to start to figure out a way to move them in that direction and improv it the whole way. I think a lot of people think that we have a lot more time on our hands than we do in general, like as game designers or as people running games, like, or even as a dungeon master. Like, I don't know if a player necessarily appreciates always the amount of time that you spend trying to do stuff, or that you have a full-time job or whatever. And I think that it's important that we do our best not to drive ourselves crazy by allowing ourselves to improv when we find the opportunity. And I agree completely with what you said about allowing the characters to be the driving force, because that takes actually a lot of pressure off of a DM when you can just sit back and watch things start to move. And then what you're really doing from that point is tailoring the game around the characters and giving them moments where you can set them up for their own interactions, and they don't realize so much that they're driving the story. And if you have a good set of players, they're so into watching that story develop that it almost becomes as good as you being a great, descriptive storyteller. because you can just drop them into a sandbox and let them run around with each other and make up the story on their own. That's definitely one of those things like a Fate or Star Wars kind of systems that they have a lot of role play driven mechanics to make it easier on a storyteller, especially like Weave. I don't know if you guys have seen that yet, but that's a new system that just came out that's very story based. The other situation that I would say in forms of tailoring something towards, the PCs is to take the opposite side of that. And as you get to know your players a little bit better, not necessarily always catering something towards the character, but catering something towards how you have evaluated the player. I know that one of the things actually I think that John has done a recent article on was intrinsic versus extrinsic goals. And you can kind of see which kind of players want those things. But you can always sort of tailor a storyline around a player if they already know everything. Like I have a player that basically has a photographic memory and has read everything that they've ever put out since first edition. And he's been a dungeon master he has a campaign right now that's been running for 19 years. So it's like he knows almost as much about a setting we're running as I do, whether or not either of us have read, that particular part in any given moment. So I tend to tailor his specific experiences and the problems or the moments and scenes that he finds himself in to be things that I know that are going to be challenging directly for him. And in that way, it creates a different dynamic within the group. And that's not necessarily like punishing him or handicapping him in some way, because I feel like that's almost cheating in that sense. But putting him in something that I know is sort of adverse to the way that he as a person would approach a situation. And then as a screenwriter, another thing that I try to put into the way that I run games is I like to try and turn the players on their heads as far as I hate cliches and I only like to use tropes in the way that it either does the quick information dump that I don't have to spend time doing exposition for, or using that to mislead so that they think that whatever they just got, like, yeah, okay, I get it, NPC bartender, shut up. We've got your thing. We'll go down and clean out your rats. And he wasn't thinking about that at all. He wasn't going to say anything about that. Or that's actually not the bartender. You just talked to the guy who moved back there and was trying to trap you, put you into an ambush down there, and you not caring about the thing is what's going to put you in a problem situation there. You already talked about doing new games, but for me, I would rather improv an entire session, but have some fresh mechanic that is interesting that the players have to figure out even in the middle of the game. For our season finale on Fury's Fate on the D&D channel, I basically created what's essentially like an MMO raid style boss for that final thing. And the whole front end of the entire campaign, like the first 6 or 7 episodes, were so story based and had almost no dice rolling that I was like, all right, so I know I have players that are jonesing to hit something. And the way that I turned the trope on its head was I gave them a really hard fight the one before, so they thought it was like the penultimate episode, like a Game of Thrones situation, and then the next session, the finale would be like, okay, these are how we're opening up plot stories and da da da. And I actually just kind of dropped that other thing on them as they were trying to make their way back to the town, and that was the actual boss. And that's where the revelations from a lot of the story. So they thought they had the whole thing solved, and I just twisted it enough to where they were like, "Oh, I used all of the those Game of Thrones moments where you open up new plot holes, but I didn't do it in the way that you would normally do it with like an exposition thing or like a quick reveal like that. I did it through narrative-driven combat."
Yeah. And I mean, I totally agree with everything you all are saying. Number one, put it in the player's hands and they'll make it fresh for themselves. If you're comfortable with them driving the story, that's the way to do it. Playing new games and reading a lot of new stuff is always a great way to get ideas, right? If you're running out of ideas for D&D, play a sci-fi game, play a game set in a modern setting, change the backdrop and it's going to feel fresh and interesting. Or play a game with a different tone. Maybe you're playing Knights Black Agents. You could play Time Watch, which uses the same system, right? It's all Gumshoe, but is a far more comedic and like sillier time travel sci-fi tone than Knights Black Agents, which is serious vampire killing badass super spy tone. That's one way to do it without having to learn a lot of new mechanics. Is you can look for stuff that way. The only other thing I would add on top of what both of you have already said is you have a smartphone in your pocket, probably. Odds are, if you're listening to this podcast right now, you are listening to it on such a device. Your smartphone has a notepad in it. Whenever you get an idea, whenever you're sitting there watching TV and you're like, oh, this would be amazing. Maybe I could do something along this lines. If I twisted it this way, if I took this trope that I'm seeing now that frustrates me so much, and this is how I would do it. If you write that down, that is a great resource to have for you to sort of look at. Even when you're playing, you could be in the middle of the game and think, I need to change things up. You can look at that list and it might help spark an idea. People used to say to writers that they should always carry around a notebook. Well, now everybody actually does. So it's super easy to write down your ideas. So keep that in mind too.
It's tough for me in those situations because I get the majority of my thinking done, mostly because it's like my only quiet time. I get the majority of my thinking done in the shower. So it's tough for me sometimes to stop what I'm like, okay, gotta either hop out of the shower or reach out, dry off my hands, type in the thing, or voice record a thing and then continue doing the thing. And then like you get writer's block in the middle of it where you're like, what was that word? That gets rough.
Yeah. The shower moments are hard. I do like to shout, and I have been known to shout, "Hey Siri," over the shower to get her to, oh, she's recording now, to get her to take a note. So yeah, those shower moments, those are hard. Sometimes I will draw in the steam on the shower door. Like, I'll just draw like one word so that the next time the shower fogs up, maybe I'll remember it and write it in my phone.
Yeah, you want another one for that is get a wet erase marker.
That's a great idea, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Do you do that? Do you have a sweet, sweet wet erase marker?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Another solution is because it's an even year, you don't need a shower.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's Canadian wilderness thing, right? I don't know what
about. So our next question comes from Andy Fundinger. How do you use initiative outside of combat? My group and those I've played in mostly do discussions and then a quick, is anyone doing anything else? But I'm curious if you have comments on rolled initiative for non-combat, perhaps to disperse, diffuse group leader effects. So I definitely have used initiative outside of combat. I often use it when there are two players who want to do something and they might contradict each other, or they might want to be the first one to go talk to a said person, grab something from off a shelf or whatever. And if they can't agree on who actually gets to do their thing first, a great solve for that is rolling initiative. And I have also used it in montage scenes because it's helpful for me as the GM to remember, like, okay, I spent a lot of time here with Karen's character doing this thing. Now we're going to move on to Dave. He's next in initiative. And that way you make sure you get everybody who is, when the party is split and they're all doing different things, you can go back and forth with people when you sort of draw initiative that way. What about you, Rudy? Have you used initiative outside of combat?
I have. I even actually made if you're familiar with the ziggurats in Tomb of Annihilation, I actually created a Kmart style strip mall within the ziggurats. And part of that came, it was complete with the bad fluorescent lighting that came from the way the torches interacted with the refuse dump that's a few, like 1,000 meters away or something, 1,000 feet away. And then there's also that sickly smell that you get. It's kind of like a paper mill. And then the being able to read the directories required survival checks, being able to find the right staircase, Window shopping had wisdom saves. People tried to get you enrolled in different programs for credit cards, essentially, credit lines. But the way that I ran that first was you roll initiative when you come in because it's so important to a lot of the negatives that you get are really only for that scene, but failing a constitution save for a thing makes you more tired, like gives you exhaustion for things. Failing a check for some wisdom save for like window shopping or getting made to buy something or whatever ends up like dropping your charisma score a little bit, so that you're more grouchy towards the next person you do, which are really great for having people role play. Like we were talking about role play mechanics earlier. Like that's a great mechanic to allow everybody at the table to know that it's okay for you to have a moment being grouchy, and it's not anybody else's. Like it's not somebody's fault. It's okay for you to role play this right now, and everybody understands and is on the same page. So I used initiative for that, but I don't like the words roll initiative. I think that's like, we're talking about storytelling. I feel like that's like putting the last chapter, like as before it starts. I prefer to surprise people with things, so I will use a variation of either proximity initiative or a randomized initiative where I like to keep all the players' names on cards, like playing cards. And I'll even do this with NPCs and like layer effects and whatnot. And I'll shuffle them. And then I will just draw them and be like, this is your turn, blah, blah, blah. So and so you're on deck.
Nice.
And that way everybody stays engaged because they don't know if it's their turn coming up and if they need to be paying attention to what the person in front of them is doing. And it also gives somebody the opportunity to go twice in a row if they hit the end of the initiative. Oh, it's so fast. That's all we. If you want to see it in action, that's what we used on Furious Fate. To the point where now even Satine runs it on Sirens of the Realms.
That's a great way to do it and keep people engaged, which is always a struggle sometimes during moments when you're focused on somebody else's character.
Yeah, one last thing I was going to say about that specifically was that when Merles started working on the Greyhawk initiative, like he and I were talking a lot about it, and we were trying to figure out kind of the way that you can avoid Dex as being the god stat. And a lot of things that happened in previous editions were using like intelligence or something instead of it, or stacking the two together, or wisdom. But I could make a play for most of these statistics could give you an edge in that. So it's just a wash. So why not just say, it's random? That's fine. And then you are nullifying a couple of feats and a couple of like features that are very specific, but how hard is it to give them something else nifty to do in their initiative instead of giving them a feature that just gives them a bonus +2 or something?
Yeah, absolutely. And if your players know that up front, right, then they're all on board because maybe they won't take that feat. Then they might take something else. It's really, really great and a really great way to do it. John, what about you? Do you ever use initiative outside of combat?
Yeah, I have a few times. Just to call out a couple of things about Andy's question. The first is he has a great tip in the question itself where he uses initiative to disperse or diffuse group leader effects. So to me, that means using initiative to kind of distribute play equally if you have a player or more players in your group that tend to dominate play. They might be louder, or they ask more questions, or they're more engaged, or the other players are just more passive. So that's a good tip from Andy, using initiative just to equally divide the spotlight. He also asked, is anyone doing anything else, as something question a GM might ask? And I don't like that question so much. I'd rather name people or go around the table in seating order, because no one has named anyone. You're probably going to get maybe that dominant player rising to the occasion every time to such a question. So if you can just ask each player deliberately, initiative takes the burden off you if you don't go around the table from remembering who you've asked. You just go next in order. At the end of the round, everybody's been asked. When I run initiative outside of combat, something I've done in the past, especially for my old Riddleport campaign, was the party would quite often split up. And I found that if one portion of the party got into combat and the other portion was still in story mode, then turn length was there's a disparity in turn length. So combat rounds generally are fast, but those who are doing lots of role playing with NPCs or exploring, and there's more narrative, those take longer. So I would try to get the storytelling to a point where now everybody needed to roll initiative for some reason, and then the whole party was kind of like back in sync. The cadence was shared again, and it was a great way to kind of keep everybody in the same vibe. And then the common thing is all my players wanting to talk to the NPC at once. Two of them crack a joke. Third one has a serious question. The fourth one wants to start doing things with their pockets. So I just call a quick initiative to see who actually gets to take up the NPC's attention or perform their action first.
Don't go anywhere. There's more Tabletop Babble coming up.
Alright, so my bosses James Introcaso and Ruty Basso asked me to record a commercial for the Newbie DM Minicast, my new 5 to 10 minute podcast aimed at giving dungeon masters quick nuggets of advice. But I've never cut a commercial before, so let me see what I could do. Best radio voice. Alright, Newbie DM here, inviting you... Oh wow, that's terrible. Hello, Newbie DM here, inviting you to join the Minicast. Wow, that's bad. This sucks. I'm never going to get this commercial for the Newbie DM Minicast done, and James and Rudy are going to be mad at me. You know what? Let me just put this aside for now and get back to recording another episode of the minicast where I give out some hot DMing advice and I'll come back to the commercial later. Sorry, James. Sorry, Rudy. It's not going to happen right now.
All right, back to the show. Our next question comes from Nigel Guest. And Nigel says, I read and hear a lot of DMs who vouch for the impact of music and thematic soundscapes that it has on their gaming, encouraging a more immersive environment. Having never utilized a soundscape, I'm intrigued as to how various DMs/GMs utilize this feature and whether they consider the use worth investing the time and effort in. Rudy, why don't we start with you? Obviously, a lot of the games you play are a little different because you're not just trying to immerse your players, but you're also trying to immerse an audience.
My feeling is that these are absolutely worth it. And it's actually to the point where I wish that I had more time to spend on it. And when you do it right, it's almost seamless to the point where you don't know that it's there. Sirenscape is fantastic about it. Beyond that, Sirenscape has like a randomized loop. So it makes it to where if you leave the same song on or the same sound effect on, he's made enough. Ben is a friend, but Ben has made enough soundscape pieces that your players won't be like, oh, here comes the song again. They won't even notice when it changes into a thing or seems to loop or something like that. It'll just be a consistent, continuous tone, really. And I think that it's really important to be able to set those tones, especially when you're moving into the boss fights or into a very descriptive or emotion-driven thing, because the way that stuff impacts that other sense helps you to be in the moment with those players a little bit better. And I think it also helps to quiet other people who might be crosstalkers, which is something that you kind of touched on there in the last question, where three people want to crack a joke, somebody wants to do this, somebody wants to do that. I do not like crosstalk whatsoever, but one way that I've found is it almost has the same effect when you change the music as when you roll a die behind your screen. People are like, oh, what's going on? Because it almost acts as a cue, and they're like, well, what is he going to do? Okay, let me listen to this music. Okay, this sounds like it's going to be this kind of scene. Or it sounds like this is going to be something that's coming. They use it almost as a big question mark that engages them in a totally different way. And that's beyond, the way that an audience engages in that, because they really want that extra sensory situation going on so that they are listening to you, they're watching you, but then that extra little, things are about to go, whatever, one way or the other. So the quick pro tip here for anybody who wants to do live streaming for the thing, your music should be roughly in the 18 to 24, the negative 18 to negative 24 decibel range if you were broadcasting. You want any sound effects or any table things to sit in an 18 to 12-ish, maybe, like negative 18 to negative 12 area. And then you want your talk to be in like a negative, no higher than like -6. And those can vary, a little bit. But the idea of a sound bed is that it's just audible down there below everything else that you have going on.
Good tip. Awesome. I also liked your tip about using music as a cue. That's fantastic.
It's what you do in plays. I don't see how it's any different.
What about you, John? What do you think about music and soundscapes?
As a tabletop, kind of like in his basement GM, I don't use sound a lot. What I do find it useful, we always have sound going. We always have music of some kind going, but for us, it fills the silence. And so that kind of seems to liven up the table ongoing. So if things kind of naturally stop and everybody is quiet, the music in the background continues to maintain the energy. And then if you switch up the music, like for example, halfway through a session, I'll cue a different playlist that has slightly upbeat music, more upbeat music as we get tired and whatnot. I don't know if that's effective or not, but I always get a pickup from it. And then quite often, the players come to the table and they're talking about work and games and movies and this and that. And then when I sense that they're kind of done and it's kind of out of their system, then I'll ask someone to start the Bluetooth up, the speakers, so that we can kind of officially start the session. And so I like to use music as a kind of a cue to say, okay, we're getting serious about gaming now.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think even a little bit of effort goes a long way, right? That, like I went to play Curse of Strahd with a friend, Mike Shea, friend of the Don't Split the Podcast Network. And he had some music on and he was like, oh, this is the soundtrack to the video game Bloodborne, which I had never played, but has this very, sort of gothic horror, mysterious music. And he just left it on. He didn't change any tracks. He didn't do anything. But even just that level of effort, which, you can find on Spotify or you can find on YouTube or that sort of thing, is great. There's lots of places that make loopable music and soundscapes really easy. Rudy, you mentioned Sirenscape is one of the best because you can get in there and adjust things. So you could have like a hobgoblin battle soundscape that you can turn up the hobgoblin war chants or you can turn them down. You can turn up the clashing of metal or you can turn it down. You can add music or not. Like Sirenscape is amazing and super loopable and great. And then Battle Bards and Tabletop Music are two websites that specialize in loopable music to use with tabletop role-playing games, and you can pick a mood and go, or you can create playlists or all kinds of stuff that, you can create a playlist that will loop one track until you tell it to go to another. And you can even do it in virtual tabletops. Most virtual tabletops allow you to bring in music. Roll20 will, when you bring up a map, you can have a track or playlist tied to that map. So as soon as you bring your players from one map to another, the music will fade out and then fade in the new track. So there's a lot of ways to do it that are very, very simple. And I agree, the immersion is really worth it for all of the reasons you all have mentioned. Cutting down on crosstalk, getting into character, and immersing yourself in the environment. I totally agree.
Have either of you guys done sound effects? It's something that I've always been curious about. So you finish, as an NPC is doing something, you have something set up for them. I guess it's like the radio style. Have either of you used tools that do that or experimented with that?
Sirenscape is an easy way to do that.
Yeah, they'll have, I remember doing a dragon battle with Sirenscape, and there was a button you could hit to make the dragon roar. There's also, I used to have a critical hit song and a critical fail song that I would play. That were like, they were like 5-second tracks that someone had written and put in the Roll20 jukebox. And certainly doing actual play podcasts, you go back in and you add them for the audience. And I just will corroborate Rudy's numbers about decibels. If you're doing an actual play podcast, the same rules apply as for streaming.
Yeah, there's a Sirenscape has the wow 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 wow.
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, and people, you can check out Sirenscape for free. They give away free sound packs. So, and you're supporting one of the nicest creators in all of creation when you buy from them. So
here's the other fun thing too, is that if you do a subscription, right? Like a lot of things, once you stop subscribing, you lose all of the things. Well, every month that they put something out, and this is not just a plug for Ben, but like this is something that's really cool that I wish a lot of other people did. But when you subscribe to the thing, it's yours forever. So you have access to whatever sound was put out while you were subscribed. So you get access to everything while you're subscribed. But if you're a subscriber from January to like February or March or whatever, you get the sound sets that they put out for each of those. It's just a really awesome business model that shows you like what his actual core value is, as far as like, I believe that everybody should have this kind of a thing. That's amazing. A lot of people don't.
So our final question comes from Richard Grilly. Richard says, how do you help a game table distinguish players from characters? It's great when the brawny footballer can do a high-pitched voice with a twist of a Scottish accent for his female halfling, but how can we add flavor, know when a PC is talking, etc., when a player can't or isn't comfortable talking like a 6 intelligence half-orc barbarian? So let's start with you, John, because I think you have some great tips about voices and mannerisms and role-playing a character.
Yeah, ironically, I'm not a GM with 1,000 voices. I make my voices lower or louder. I think those are the best impressions I can do. So I hear Richard on his quest for better portrayal and also just better signals. So players know when they're speaking in character versus out. So they kind of get that better immersion. So I think one thing is that actions speak louder than words. So if you embody what your character does, then you can mimic those as a player at the table. A lot of people are more comfortable acting things out physically than they are maybe emotionally or with their voice. And I'm like that too. And a punching motion's always easy to make at your players, right? So actions, I think over time, define your character no matter what. So if you as a player can focus on what your character does, their mannerisms, the way their body language works, how they hold their head or whatever, you can mimic that at the table. And it's kind of a low risk move for you, especially if you're a shy player. Props are good. So even a pencil, if you want to use that as a sword, that can indicate when you're holding your pencil, you are talking in your character, even if you're using that kind of third person language. If you want to wear a costume at the table or brandish your cape or even use the dice as signals, props are easy and fast ways to embody a character and to signal I'm in character. I think this is something that Rudy said earlier, but if you can have a style, this is a way to keep players fresh, I think was your comment, but you could also use style to suggest that you're in character. So if your character is sly, well, you don't have to come up with the words that a sly character might say because you're not good at that. You can just try to be sly at the table when being the character, or brash or aggressive or secretive. So kind of think of a style that your character might have or an NPC might have and embody that. And then ultimately, if you can, speak in person, like in first person. So when your character does something, say, I do something, address the other characters as if they were real people at your table and how you would address them if they were sitting across from you. I think those are good, clear signals for better role playing and to kind of indicate, yeah, I'm in character right now, as opposed to I'm John, I'm asking about a rule, or just being a jerk with an ill-timed joke.
Yeah, that is very true. I would recommend a series of articles on roleplayingtips.com by a brilliant author about role-playing NPC mannerisms. Something that I wrote for John for his website.
Those are excellent ones.
People should check that out because they discuss different ways to change your voice, but then also different actions you can take to physically embody the character as well, to sort of get at what John was talking about. Ruty, what about you? Obviously, you play with a lot of people who are very, very good at inhabiting characters, but I also know you play at conventions, you play all over the place, so you play with many different kinds of people. What do you think when someone isn't as comfortable doing a voice? How do you know when they're speaking versus a character and that sort of thing?
I think John hit a good deal of the options that are readily available. I think that a good way to kind of posture is a big one that he sort of touched on there. And then I think cadence, the way that you approach something or the thought you put into it, and even the words you use can be very telling for a character in juxtaposition of needing to drop into some sort of low voice and have some sort of gruffy thing going on, or grabbing an accent out of nowhere that doesn't even really sound like it's the right thing that you're going for, you know? And also, I mean, really the biggest thing is like, if you show the other people at the table that they can't fail, like that, and that's, that's not a tip for you to tell for a player to go like, oh, I need to know I not fail in these things, right? It's more of a thing that you can do as a player to help, or that you as a GM can do to help other players make that leap of faith, really, because really what they're afraid of, or what's going on right there, is that they don't want to fail at it. One of the things that I lead into everything with is, and every game, every session zero, is failure is story. It is literally how we get story. You have to fail in order to achieve anything. If you're a Mary Sue, you might as well stay home because we already know how it's going to end. And every success you have along the way, because you don't fail. So, like, making an environment safe for people to experiment with things and fail. And that means that, the players that are there with you, like that, they're going to take your lead as a DM. But if they know that mocking somebody for the way their accent is, it's not going to be allowed or accepted at the table, it's going to be frowned upon, then they're going to be less likely to do that. And they will become more, not only more accepting, but more invested in helping people find that voice. So along with the posture, a cadence, finding a character, and you can easily do this by just taking one of the 7 dwarves, but taking a character that matches what you have kind of envisioned for that that PC, and plucking out the things from that make you feel like that character when you're talking is really all it's going to take. Like, so if you're afraid, like, dive in. And then go to all the sources, like your little write up on John's role playing tips thing, or check out Guy's stuff for how to be a good DM, or play a lot of video games, and really just do it when you're alone. It's not a big deal. I walk around like I'm a crazy person in a lot of my life because I will say things to myself. I will talk to myself about how I'm preparing eggs in the morning if I want to. And I'll give you a little pro tip for voiceover, is that when you want to drop into an accent, the best thing you can do is have either a trigger word or a trigger phrase that is going to help you fall right into that thing. I'm sure, if you wanted to do some roughshod Australian accent, dropping another shrimp on the barbie is going to help you get there, even if it's a terrible accent like that was. But, don't play with a bunch of Australians because they have that tall poppy syndrome. So if you actually are good, they're just going to tell you it's terrible.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. I try to say space noodle. That's my spice noodle when I try to do a bad Australian accent. But trigger phrases like that are so helpful. And I totally agree about the just going for it. Leading by example is a great way to do it. I do not do accents well at all, but I'll go for them at the table. And if I get questioned on them, I'll just say, if somebody's like, man, that's a terrible Southern accent, I'll be like, well, this isn't the American South. This is, Faerun. And so this is what I'm telling you people from this area sound like. Like, it doesn't mean that they're from South Carolina. It means that they're from Waterdeep.
On that note, I like to say to people, oh, maybe that's because he's not that good at that accent.
Ooh, nice.
And they go, okay, I'm going to make an insight check. And I'm like, no, you're not. You don't tell me what kind of checks you're going to make.
That's good. I like that. I'm definitely going to use that.
And they'll stop questioning you because that's the last thing that they want to know right then is like, plus, meta. Yeah. Meta.
Totally. And along those lines, encourage your players to do it not just by leading by example, but also using the systems that the games give you to reward that play, right? So if someone has an excellent role-playing scene or role-plays their character well, D&D has the built-in inspiration mechanic for you to reward and encourage that player. And like a great way, I know people often say they forget about inspiration. A great way to remind yourself is put those tokens right in front of you. Put a bunch of poker chips or special colored D30s or whatever it is, Mancala stones, and that will remind you to award inspiration. Put them in a pile on the table and let players know they can award it to each other if you want to, so that you have help giving it out. And that it'll also feel even greater when like a fellow player recognizes like, hey, that was great role playing. It's like, cool, you were watching this scene that I was playing and not like looking at your phone or staring off into space. That's always great too. And it's a great way to get everybody engaged and involved. D&D also sort of has this unspoken, if you role play or describe what you're doing really well, maybe you get an automatic success just because it's kind of awesome, right? The rule of cool. And so like, if somebody role plays a scene really well where they're trying to persuade someone to do something, maybe they don't need to make that persuasion roll because they actually succeeded in persuading you, the GM, about it. So like, just, let it happen without the skill check. Like, use the game's mechanics to reward great role-playing behavior to help encourage it. That's a great way to do it. I also think it is fine for the occasional person to say, oh, I'm not saying this now, my character is, or, like when that comes up, that's fine. But you definitely don't want to encourage that if that's not the kind of thing that's fun for you at the table. If you want to encourage good behavior, good role-playing behavior, reward it and lead by example.
Oh, yeah. And I don't let people say, oh, I did. My character didn't say I did. I was like, no, I heard it. And the NPC heard it. So you might want to think about that next time.
Yes, definitely. Well, yeah, if anybody's like, oh, we should do this, haha, funny joke, but they have, I always roll with that. I'm like, well, you said you were going to do it, so I assumed you are. Here we go.
Yeah, I don't let people take things back at a table just because, it's one thing if there's a piece of information that a GM like missed or forgot to let out for people. That's one thing, but if you say something and you're telling me that your character is going to do that, or you're even like making a joke about it that is especially at somebody else's expense, hey, you just screwed over the party or yourself because you thought that this was like your character wouldn't have done that. If you were thinking in your character and you were acting as your character, you wouldn't have done that. Maybe, but you just had to talk over everybody else and say your thing. So I guess that's what's going to happen. I'm a very consequence heavy GM, and that's in the sense of I believe that a world without consequence is of no consequence. And if you want your game to have consequence and meaning for your players and for you ultimately, because why else are you there? Then you need to enforce that kind of a thing so that they appreciate it and everybody appreciates it. It helps keep everybody on the same page.
Definitely. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Tabletop Babble. Before we go, Ruty Rutenberg, where can people find you on the internet?
So if you like to do all the social media things, you can find me pretty much anywhere at Ruty Woot, which is RutyWoot. And that's on the Twitters, the Instagram, all the things. If you would like to watch us play, you can come visit Maze Arcana on Twitch. Subscribe. We got some really awesome little emotes in there. There's a dapper Ruty, where you get Ruty in a vest and a tie. They animated me. I didn't know I was going to be animated, but I got animated. And we've got a little chibi Satine that's squeeing, Satine Squeenix. We got Kyle's
That's
High.
awesome.
Yeah, right. And we even have the satchel. And if you don't know the significance of that, I won't spoil it for you. You can go find it. And we have RPG, which is Satine's little Russian blue cat. Great little emotes. It couldn't be better. Besides that, you can find me on twitch.tv/D&D. And you can throw a follow there or or subscribe there as well. And then if you want to get some inside information, maybe check out some of the mechanics, do some playtesting for things that I'm toying with but haven't put out yet, a great place to do that, or to be in a game that Satine and I are going to run or anything like that, we have a Patreon. And that is patreon.com/Maze Arcana. Outside of that, you can always sign up for the mailing list at mazearcana.com, and you can keep up to date with all the things we're doing for D&D, or all the things that are going to go on for the new Mythmaker Society set in Eberron. I feel like that's it, but always, the Guild Adepts on the DM's Guild. I always forget to say that one, so I'm going to make sure I say it this time. You can do that. And if you want to watch me in anything or hear my voice in things, you can just go to imdb.com and look up the things I was in.
Excellent. Yes. Eberron, if I may just say, thank you so much for shedding even more light on Eberron, the greatest D&D campaign setting, except for, of course, the Luna Valley, created by Johnn Four. Johnn Four, where can people find you?
Your adventure should begin at roleplayingtips.com. I'm giving away a couple of books there. Sign up for my GM tips and explore all the GM advice articles and tips from the last almost 20 years now, and have more fun at every game.
Excellent.
And can I say real fast, though, that I am somebody who is on his mailing list, and I actually when I first started doing Maze Arcana, I reached out to him and said, hey, this is a thing that we're doing, and it's me and Satine Phoenix, and we're running this game, and like, I would like to have a chat with you, talk about these different things, and I'm really interested in Campaign Logger. And I signed up for basically everything he has, and I unsubscribe from so many things on a regular basis, and I keep just every gold nugget that pops into my inbox. I'm just like, I can twist that. I can make that work.
It's a sickness. Your hand is over the unsubscribe button every time, but somehow you just can't commit.
For you, it's not. I've never even gotten close to unsubscribing from your site. And I do it for everything else. I hate spam, but yours isn't spam. Yours is actually good knowledge and everything.
Thank you.
And you like to call out the people that are there that contribute. The people that, ask you questions and stuff, you like to draw them in and give them the recognition for those things, which is fantastic. Wait a minute. That's how we got on this podcast.
It is. And I agree. The newsletter is something that delights me when it shows up in my inbox, which I don't really feel that way about most emails. So it is a great thing that people should check out. It is a gift of brain bombs every time. So thank you, John, for doing that. Thank you to both of you for joining me on this episode of Tabletop Babble.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Man, that was a great chat. I'm excited to have more of these. Look forward to our next chat featuring guest GM Celeste Conowitch of the Venture Maidens, a great podcast right here on the Don't Split the Podcast Network that you should be listening to. Check it out. People, Tabletop Babble, we're only starting our second year here as a podcast. We need your help growing, particularly in international communities. I went on over to iTunes and went to our Canada ratings, and I found we only have seven. I know there are more Canadians listening to this show than the 7 that left a review. Head on over to iTunes, leave us a review. It helps other people find the show. Today's 5-star review from Canada comes from Len Pelletier's Simulacrum. That is an awesome name. This review is entitled The Definitive RPG Talk Show. Len says, Len's Simulacrum says, "Thank you, James, for the thousands of hours and tons of positivity you've poured into this hobby over the years. Tabletop Babble is killing it week after week." Thank you so much, Len's Simulacrum, for leaving this review. People, go leave us a review. I'm scouring the international charts as well. So go ahead, check us out, leave it on iTunes. Even if you don't have an iTunes account, you can make one for free. Rate and recommend me and all of the other podcasts that you love. We will very much appreciate it. All right, people, you can find me on Twitter at James Introcaso and over at worldbuilderblog.com. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget that RPGs are like sex. It's better when you have a bard singing in the background. Hey everybody, just a quick note from me to say that this episode of Tabletop Babble is also brought to you by Kobold Press. Kobold Press now has Eldritch Lairs for 5th edition D&D. Kobold Press loves monsters and their lairs, and this shows in their latest book, Eldritch Lairs. Eldritch Lairs contains 8 short arcane-themed adventures for characters levels 4 through 8, the sweet spot of D&D adventuring. GMs can drop these adventures into any existing 5e campaign or run them as standalone one-shot games. Players can explore the trap-filled pit of the Dust Goblins, take to the skies in the Palace of the Windlords, enter the Undying Tournament, and much more. Eldritch Lairs is full color and filled with beautiful art and maps. You can get it today at www.koboldpress.com. Been a while since I dropped the www into a URL, but you know what? I'm feeling frisky. I'm doing it because it's great. You should definitely check it out. There are so many amazing lairs in here, and they are great to have on hand. Kobold Press saves my game so much when my players go do something I did not expect them to do. Plus, they're just so incredible. It's also available for Pathfinder, and all of the maps are friendly for a virtual tabletop. Check it out now at koboldpress.com, Eldritch Lairs for 5th edition and Pathfinder.